I think now everything is all going very well. Okay, good morning, everybody, again. And thank you for coming to here, to this conference room. And also, thank you very much for joining us by Zoom system today. Okay, today we are really fortunate to have Mr. Paul Saunders here with us. Thank you very much for coming here from Washington, D.C. to Japan. And we will have a JIIA forum discussing the outlook for diplomacy and security policy under the second Trump administration. I think it is really good timing to host this event. So I'm really delighted to welcome Mr. Saunders here. I don't think we need to introduce Mr. Saunders with like a leading all of his CV, but Mr. Saunders is now president of the Center for National Interest and a member of board of directors. And he is a specialist on US foreign policy and security policy and energy security and climate change, and also US-Russian relations and Russian foreign policy. I heard he will focus in his initial presentation today, he will focus on Russia and Russia-Ukrainian war. But as you hear now, his expertise is very wide. So you can make a lot of questions on his take on the Trump 2 foreign policy and the domestic policy directions. He is senior advisor at Energy Innovation Forum Project, DIHON project, where he served as president from 2019 to 2024. And he was with Center for National Interest from 2005 to 2019 before he became a president of Energy Innovation DIHON project. And Mr. Saunders also served in the Bush administration from 2003 to 2005 as senior advisor to Undersecretary of State for Global Affairs. And before that, Mr. Saunders also served as director of the center from the 1997 to 2003. And also he was assistant director of the center from its founding in 1994 until 1997. So your career with the center are really long. And as you know, the center was in the past named Nixon Center.
That's right.
Yeah, when I visited, when I was I think a doctor student with Professor Kubo. So, and today we are also very fortunate to have Professor Kubo. He's now president of National Defense Academy, but he is a professor of emeritus at University of Tokyo. And actually, it was 22 years ago, I attended his graduate student seminar. So it is very my honor to have him in today's panel. So today's plan is, firstly, I want to ask Mr. Saunders to share his view for 20 minutes or so. And then I'm going to ask Professor Kubo for his initial reaction, comments, and questions. And then I will follow up. I'm going to follow up with my own question to Mr. Saunders. And then Mr. Saunders will respond to our questions. Then I will open up the floor. So without any further ado, floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Sahashi, Professor Kubo, and of course, to the Japan Institute for International Affairs and the staff. I'm really delighted to be in Japan again and very much appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you today. So where the Trump administration's foreign policy is concerned during the second term coming up here, I guess the first thing I should say is that, my guess is as good as any of yours. And what I mean by that is that the president-elect I think deliberately cultivates very considerable uncertainty surrounding his goals, his plans. And I believe that he does that out of a sense that this is a valuable way to increase his negotiating leverage, by, first of all, denying his counterpart information about what it is that he's really trying to accomplish, what it is that he would be satisfied with, and what his ultimate objectives are. So I think there's very considerable uncertainty. I think we have to accept that and live with that. And I think that will be certainly one of the key features of American foreign policy during this period. So, you know, get ready for the unpredictability. I thought I would focus, you know, very narrowly here in my opening comments on the Russia-Ukraine war, firstly, because as Professor Sahashi mentioned, it's an area of expertise. But secondly, you know, it's a major ongoing war in Europe, which is, I think, in many respects, a driver of some larger global processes that are important for the United States and in my view, for many of its allies as well. So Trump, of course, has said that he would, you know, end the conflict in 24 hours, that he would end the conflict even before he came into office. And he said many other things, that he would kind of press the Ukrainian government to come to the table and negotiate, that if Russia doesn't negotiate, he'll give Ukraine more weapons than it has ever received from anyone ever. So he said a variety of different things. My personal view is that it will be not so easy, actually, to end the fighting and to reach an agreement. And, you know, certainly in the American political context, and I suspect in at least some of our allies, there's very considerable concern that the negotiations that Trump may have with Russia and Ukraine would follow a trajectory similar either to the trade negotiations with China, where there was a lot of sort of chaos and disruption, and then there was an agreement, but China didn't live up to it, or the negotiations that the Trump administration had with the Taliban, where the United States had very weak leverage for a variety of reasons, and had to accept, you know, fairly undesirable terms in order to end the conflict, in order to extract the United States from the conflict. I'm sorry, to be more precise. And then after the United States left, the situation collapsed. So I think those two cases, to my mind, are kind of the main fears that people have. I think if we look at the history of Trump's efforts at international negotiation during his first term, there are actually a lot of other things that occurred. And there's kind of a spectrum. So at one end of the spectrum, at the more successful end of the spectrum, you know, we had the Abraham Accords, you know, the agreement for the UAE and Bahrain to normalize relations with Israel. We had the renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement, now the USMCA. The Abraham Accords, I would view as, you know, basically successful and a fairly important agreement, actually. The USMCA negotiations, I would view as, you know, basically successful and not an especially important agreement in the sense that it really didn't fundamentally change much. There were also a number of other things that occurred. Trump tried to apply maximum pressure to Iran. He withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. He wanted to have a better, quote unquote, better deal for the United States with Iran. That failed. It led to a kind of a simmering conflict with Iran, various tit for tat strikes back and forth, the assassination of Soleimani, the Iranian drone strikes on Saudi Arabia. In this region, obviously, there was the effort to negotiate with Kim Jong-un, fire and fury. We were going to see, some kind of historic new peace on the Korean Peninsula. That also failed. Right? So I understand why people focus on kind of the China and Afghanistan cases, if you will. But the first thing I would do in thinking about this is to encourage everyone to think about the broader spectrum of possibilities for how it might play out. In my own mind, as I said a couple of minutes ago, actually, I think it's going to be quite challenging. And if we look at what happened with Iran and what happened with North Korea, to my mind, and I'm not an Iran expert, I'm not a North Korea expert, but to my mind, looking at those two negotiations, one of the largest contributing factors in the failure of those two efforts was the failure of the administration to understand what it was that the other side actually wanted. As a result, to try to pursue approaches that really just weren't fundamentally realistic, actually. And I think in the Russia-Ukraine case, there's a reasonably high risk that we may go down a similar pathway. Let me say maybe just a couple of more things about that, and then I'll wrap up and be happy to take some questions and to talk more about that or other topics. I think one big question is how much does Putin actually want an agreement versus believing that time is on his side and he has more to gain from continuing to fight than he does from a peace agreement. And I would argue that for negotiations to end a conflict to succeed, you need all of the parties at the same time to be strong enough that they're sufficiently confident to go into negotiations feeling that they won't have to give away things that they really don't want to give up, but also weak enough to feel that they actually have to negotiate in the first place. In this particular case, my view would be that fundamental condition actually is not met. Some Americans would say it's not a conflict that's ripe for a settlement, in the sense that the parties themselves aren't really prepared to settle, and in the Ukrainian case, I think concerned about making concessions that they don't want to make. They may end up having to do that anyway, of course, because ultimately their resources to continue to fight on without American support would be sharply constrained. But that would be definitely an option that they would have. particularly if they don't want to concede. And by the way, they have a variety of different ways that they could escalate. I mean, the Ukrainians that they haven't pursued so far, I assume in part because of the United States. And then secondly, the Russians, to whom I already alluded, I think that they may well still have the view at this point that there's more to gain by keeping up the pressure on Ukraine. And, there's a separate debate in each case about, how long can each side continue to do what it's doing. And, we can sort of get into that in greater depth during the questions if anybody wants to talk about that. But I'm not persuaded that the parties are really ready, and especially that the Russians are ready. Then the second thing is that negotiating an agreement like this, if it's to occur, will be extremely complex. Russia, Ukraine, European Union, NATO, everybody's sanctions, United States Congress, as actually an independent actor. And I'm not sure that some of the people who hope for a quick resolution of this situation really understand actually how complicated it would be to bring that about. We also have, of course, the issue of the $300 billion in frozen Russian assets. There are a wide variety of different views about what should happen to that money. Russia obviously will want all of that back. The final thing I would say, and this connects back to sort of what would Russia be prepared to do, and does the incoming Trump administration really understand that? So many are concerned about some kind of a deal because they can see that Trump doesn't really seem to care about Ukraine very much. And I think, that's fairly clear actually from what he said. I don't think he has sort of a strong attachment to particular borders or Ukraine's relationship with NATO or a number of these other factors that have been, certainly important to the Biden administration and previous administrations. At the same time, however, I think it's fairly clear from observing the president-elect's personality and past behavior, he wants to be seen as a success. He wants to win. He wants to sit down across the table from Putin and get a good deal and come home to Americans and say that he got a good deal. So if he is prepared to make a variety of different concessions related to Ukraine in order to get a good deal, I would be asking myself, what is it that he wants in exchange for that will make it look like a good deal? Is it something related to China? Is it something related to Iran? Is it something related to North Korea? What is it? And most important, is it something that Putin would actually be prepared to do? I think that's another big question that I have. So I will wrap it up there. You can tell I'm a little bit of a skeptic on a quick piece, and I'm happy to talk more about that or to take broader questions on foreign policy or, for that matter, actually on energy policy to the extent that anyone is interested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we want to have Professor Kubo as a commentator. As you know, he's a most well-known professor of American politics and foreign policy in Japan. So Professor Kubo, floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. That was a bit flattering, but thank you, Sahashi-san, for agreeing to be the moderator. And thank you very much, Paul, for coming to JIIA. No, I make a couple of questions, and the first one is related to Ukraine, the war between Russia and Ukraine. Even if the United States terminates its assistance to Ukraine under Trump, many European countries like the UK, France, or Baltic countries will keep helping Ukraine, at least for the time being. Do you think, is it enough to let Ukraine keep fighting? Some countries, as I said, seem to be still determined to help Ukraine, which might be one factor influencing the outcome of the possible negotiation about the ending the war. And then this is also slightly related to the war in Ukraine, and which is about the linkage between crisis in Europe and the possible crisis in Asia. A former Prime Minister of Japan, Kishida, said again and again that Ukraine today might be Asia tomorrow. And I think many the national security specialists in Japan agree with that statement. What do you think of the possible linkage between a crisis in Europe and a crisis in Asia? Or what do you think the Trump people think about this, or Republicans in Congress, how do they think, what is their thinking on this? And one example is Elbridge Colby. He strongly suggests that the US should concentrate its energy on Asia, especially on defending Taiwan, and instead decreasing its effort to help Ukraine. So, but it is a typical thinking among the national security advisors surrounding Trump or not. We didn't detect this kind of argument under the Biden administration, but so this might be the kind of Republican kind of argument, but what is your take? Then it's about China itself. I think Sahashi will also ask questions about China because he's a specialist about US-China relations, but President-elect Trump said that if China invades Taiwan, there'll be 200% tariff on China. First, is it realistic? I never experienced, I never saw 200% tariff. That'll be almost the same meaning as a no trade at all. But anyway, and then is it strong enough to deter China? In other words, he's not saying that he or the United States will resort to force to defend Taiwan. So if you look at this side, then it's okay. There'll be just a trade war, and there'll be no military pushback. Then there's a different interpretation about what Mr. Trump said. So what is your thinking, and how would that sound to China in your view? And then I have some kind of more kind of questions on like principles. Mr. Trump uses two phrases or two slogans on foreign policy. First one is America first. Then he also uses peace through strength. But these are for many people, many national security specialists radically different ideas. The America First was used like in 1941 to prevent the United States from intervening in European war. So it was a very strong isolationist kind of content. And the P2 strength was first used by Henry Scoop Jackson, and then Reagan took it. And it meant to use the kind of it suggests the foreign policy based on the strength, the military strength. How many probably specialists wonder why, how these two different ideas can coexist in the broad mind of Mr. Trump, they are, depending on the interpretation, mutually exclusive or even incompatible ideas, but he uses the same, the two phrases the same way or in one sentence. So how would you make sense of that? He just simply doesn't understand these the kind of principles, or what is his foreign policy principles, or which one is really represent Mr. Trump's foreign policy ideas. And the last one is about Mr. Trump's the perception of alliance or allies. If we talk to, when we talk to our counterparts in the United States, the national security advisors, and we say we are allies, then normally, we are welcomed, and alliance normally represents shared national security interests, and preferably shared the fundamental values like democracy or freedom. But it might be that with Mr. Trump, alliance or allies might mean very different things. For him, it might be that he may have a very negative ideas about allies, depending on the United States for its security, while exploiting the United States and making a lot of money at the cost of the United States. And this might be a little bit too stronger words, but so this is kind of the thing we have to be care about. Mr. Trump may have a very different idea about alliance, and we tend to be kind of optimistic about the current U.S.-Japan relations because we are allies. But this kind of elite thinking might not work, under Mr. Trump. But I might be a bit too much pessimistic. So, what is your view? So, thank you very much. These are some small and big questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I think I also have some questions. So sorry, we don't intend to be so much overwhelming you, but
you're giving me a lot of work. You're giving me a lot.
No, but just let me share some of my questions to you. So first of all, thank you very much for coming and your take on the Russian-Ukrainian war. And we understand, as you said in the very conclusion, quick peace is a little bit difficult for Trump administration. But so then my question is, Ukrainian war or termination of Ukrainian war is not the priority for Trump administration. So this is my question, because during the campaign, we thought he would be very serious to terminate the war in Ukraine. But as you said, yes, we understand it might be very difficult to bring everybody, all parties, to the one table and to make a conclusion of agreement. But then Trump will be satisfied with that outcome, or will he, put his energy to other things? He is, a little bit serious about, peacemaker, about his role as a peacemaker. So he may want to have some, want to keep his brand image as a peacemaker, only by his own definition, right? We don't think he is a really good peacemaker, but he think, he is a good peacemaker and deal maker. So if he encounters a situation, it is very difficult to make peace in Ukrainian war. What will he do? Mm-hmm. So this is my first question. The second question is relating to the Ukrainian war, but how do you evaluate the partnership between Russia and North Korea? Because here in Northeast Asia, we start to be very much concerned about the impact of Russian-North Korean partnership. And some people even say, if that partnership is strong enough, North Korea might think America would be difficult to employ the kind of blackmail against North Korea, right? In the first Trump administration, in the year 2017, Trump really wanted to make a blackmail against North Korea. It was, I think the operation name was Bloody Nose operation. McMaster and others brought this idea to Trump, but some people say if Kim Jong-un and North Korea believe the partnership with Moscow is strong enough, United States couldn't make military intervention to North Korea. But I wonder, how American people, especially Washington people, think about the meaning of this, important partnership between Moscow and Pyongyang. I don't think, all people agree on such a strong partnership between two countries. But what is your take about Russia-North Korea relations? And the third point is relating to Professor Kubo's comment on the characteristics of Trump administration's foreign policy. MAGA, make America great again, or peace through strength, right? And some people say even after knowing Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz and Alex Wong joined the administration, but some people say no, Trump administration or Trump 2.0 is China folk in name only. So because they said, Trump 2 is still MAGA. MAGA diplomacy is not like, very, very much hawkish against China. And they say, MAGA type of people and even Marco Rubio or Waltz need to employ the MAGA agenda. Because they are so much nervous about their boss. So how do you think, because we, to some extent, we people in Asia especially are kind of satisfied by the lineup of China hawkish people by Trump 2.0. But the Nikkei Asia actually contributed the article, oh no, China hawk in name only. So which interpretation would be legitimate, would be, articulate? So this is my question, third question. And the last question is just a tiny question, but somehow in Japan and maybe in English media, we start to wonder what will be the role of J.D. Vance in foreign policy. And, at least I personally didn't believe he would become such a good politician back to a few years ago, but he started to become a really good politician, at least to attract people's attention. But I don't know what kind of relationship he has with Mr. Trump. But some media report start to say, oh, J.D. Vance will be really key person in Trump 2.0 because Trump cannot fire him. And Trump might, ask him to play some role, especially in foreign policy, or kind of maybe regulation over platformer in Silicon Valley. But I don't know. What is your take about the role of JD Vance? This is my last question.
All right.
So,
okay.
Okay, floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. That's 10 questions, and none of them are simple questions. So I'll do my best, and I will try not to spend too much time on any individual question. So the question about kind of what happens if the United States unilaterally terminates its assistance to Ukraine. First of all, I don't know. But secondly, look, the European governments are providing sort of most of the financial help to Ukraine, and the United States is providing most of the military help to Ukraine. And it's not an absolute in either case, but there has been sort of a certain division of labor. The United States is also providing intelligence collection, reconnaissance, and targeting data, particularly for these longer range systems. It's not obvious that would be easily replaceable. I think there's another big question, which is, the United States drops out, we can sort of say, maybe Europe continues, but what does Europe actually mean in that context? Does it mean every single European country? Some of them aren't really doing very much right now. How united is the European Union on doing this after that? Is it an EU level activity? Is it a kind of a coalition of the willing among Britain and France and Poland or something like that, sort of kind of to pick the three that have been among the more vocal? There may be, I think the question is, where European unity is concerned, how much of it is unity because Europe is unified, and how much of it is unity because the United States has been encouraging unity? And there are sort of two elements to European unity on that question. So I don't really know. Ukraine, I think, has been very creative, and there are a lot of different things that the Ukrainians could do if they wanted to keep fighting without the United States. The United States has been putting pretty sustained pressure on Ukraine to be careful about the oil sector targets because of gasoline prices in the United States. That would be kind of one that immediately comes to mind. There have been at a fairly low level so far a kind of long string of apparent sabotage attacks inside Russia. Some of them actually quite far away from the front. So there are a variety of things that could occur. I don't really know. I think it's clear that if the United States were to pull out unilaterally, that would be a very heavy blow. It would be a very heavy blow. I was at an event in Europe actually about a week ago where somebody observed that I think the annual European total production of tanks is like 40 tanks. So, that kind of raises some questions. It would be tough. I don't think it is inherently kind of fatal to that effort, but I think it would be transformative and it would be extremely difficult. The linkage between Europe and Asia I think is kind of very complicated. And maybe I'll connect this actually to your question about the prioritization. So I'll try to do sort of both of those at the same time. There clearly are, and it sort of links to the China hawk thing too, actually. So there are clearly a number of people around Trump who are China hawks. And I think that Trump, because of the many different things that he says, and actually the uncertainty that he creates about what he really means and what his goals are, I think there's a tendency among some to think that he shares the same goals that they do, or among some others to believe that they may be able to shape his thinking in favor of their goals. Not fully obvious that it's correct, actually, you know, the inferences that people are making in either case. Not obvious to me. On the prioritization question, I think there clearly are many people inside the Republican Party, and I would say more broadly, who consider to be China consider China to be the more serious threat longer term to the United States, and view in that context, you know, the war in Ukraine as something that is kind of drawing resources away from that. And something that we should find a way to terminate. And, you know, there's a spectrum of views on how it should be terminated, right? I mean, there would be some who would argue that we need to make a really major push and you know, try to do more and end it quickly that way. There would be others who would go in the other direction. But I think the sense that China is the main American problem is a pretty widespread view on both sides, and not just on the Republican side. My personal view is that I view China as a more serious, longer term problem, but I'm not sure that it's quite that easy to sort of prioritize and create a division of labor and, you know, you do this and we'll do that. The first reason for that is that, you know, our European allies want to be allies of the United States because they want American help in dealing with Russia. Our allies in Asia want to be our allies because they want our help in dealing with North Korea and also dealing with China. So if we focus on only one of those things, you know, then we will have some allies who feel that it's a one-sided alliance. And I think that's not a very useful way to go. So I think actually in practice, you know, we, the United States, need to be kind of trying to focus on doing as much as we can in both areas. You know, there are going to be trade-offs, and that's difficult, but I think we have to try to do both. I think we have to try to get our allies to do more, you know, and President Trump certainly wants that too. He has his own, you know, particular approach to trying to bring that about. But I think that's pretty important. And ultimately, I think we all need to be helping one another with everything. And I'd like to see the United States working to get our allies in Asia more involved in Europe, and our allies in Europe more involved in Asia. I think that's part of the equation too. And I personally, I think part of being a leader is taking that role and in trying to help everyone to kind of align their perceptions of their interests and align their efforts in that way. It's not obvious to me that sort of a bad ending in Ukraine would sort of automatically lead to something bad in Asia for two reasons, really. One is that actually whatever happens at the end in Ukraine, Russia has paid a really high price, far higher than Putin expected when he ordered that operation. And I think it's been, quite clear to China and for that matter to others how high the price has been. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, China has been watching, they're not just going to watch the end. They've been watching the whole thing. And they're going to be drawing lessons from the entire experience. And if they decide to act on the basis, to try to do something about Taiwan or whatever else, it will be on the basis of the totality of the lessons that they draw from this experience, to include, what sanctions are we most likely to try to use, and how do they protect themselves from that, and just how many anti-missile interceptors can we produce in what period of time, and they're going to be drawing lessons from all of that. So I wouldn't sort of the ending is important, but I wouldn't overemphasize the role of the ending. The next one was the 200% tariffs, and kind of, is that enough? And yes, he's not saying anything about defending Taiwan, I think from a historical perspective, that's very unusual. And some people might even view it as dangerous. I don't think that a 200% tariff would really be enough to deter China, because actually, I think if China, first of all, if China actually invaded Taiwan, I think they would sort of expect most of our trade to end anyway. And so I'm not sure that the tariff would really make that much difference. Secondly, I have to say, if our trade did continue, there are some very nice EVs that sell in China for around $12,000, and there's some very nice EVs that sell in the United States for around $70,000, and you would need actually more than a 200% tariff to try to fix that particular problem. I think when Trump, I don't know why Trump said that. I don't know what he's trying to accomplish. And I certainly don't know what he thinks about defending Taiwan. I will note, however, in the context of our European allies, the comment that, I don't want to defend countries that haven't paid, right? That haven't done their 2%. And I think in some cases he makes statements like that, actually not with the intent that China is listening to it, but with the intent, maybe that Taiwan is listening to it. And there are a number of people around Trump who feel that Taiwan is not doing enough. And should be kind of taking all of this more seriously. So is that what he's doing? I don't know. I'm just setting that out there as one potential interpretation. Peace through strength and America first, MAGA and America first. I think peace through strength I view as intellectually a pretty flexible statement. And what I mean by that, kind of to be more precise, is actually peace for whom? Peace for whom, right? So I mean, you can take sort of a very strict isolationist interpretation of America first, and still want the United States to be really strong so that nobody dares to cause any problems for us. So I think actually the two things are compatible. If you take just a very narrow focus on American interests and America's role in the world, an overly narrow perspective from my point of view, but I think that actually it is possible to reconcile the two things. And then Fumiaki, your last question was about allies and what Trump thinks about allies. And look, I think that alliances are fundamentally about both interests and values, at least for the United States and for many of our allies. We have sort of largely, but not exclusively, values-driven alliances. In the history of international diplomacy, over the last hundreds of years, it was not always the case that alliances were values-driven. They were often more narrowly interest-driven. I'm not sure that President Trump President-elect Trump is overly preoccupied with the kind of the values dimension of our relations with our allies. I think he is focused on the interest dimension, and I think you're probably right that he has a view. I'm a foreign policy realist, and I would say as a foreign policy realist, I think he thinks there's been free riding, right, on the part of our allies, and wants to do something about that. And he clearly operates to a very large extent on the basis of his instincts. And I think actually that where power and leverage are concerned, I think actually he has pretty highly refined instincts. And you can sort of agree or disagree with, whether or not that's good or bad, but I think he has spent a lot of his career, really all of his career, and here I mean before being president, kind of amassing and using leverage and using power. And if you look at his book, The Art of the Deal, and just put it narrowly in the deal-making context, he talks a lot about that in the book. And actually is fairly transparent about how he goes about trying to have deals, and sometimes you don't have enough leverage to get the deal that you want, and you need to create leverage for yourself. And he talks a lot about these things. So I think that one of the things that he has, I would argue, kind of instinctively understood about our alliance relationships and the free riding problem is that the only leverage that the United States really has in dealing with the free riding problem is to say that we're going to stop, and then you're going to be on your own. And no previous president was really willing to say that. I imagine probably because most of them were either career politicians or career officials, and they were very experienced, and it was sort of something that they either couldn't say or wouldn't say. And in Trump's case, I think it's something that he's very willing to say. To what extent does he mean it? I don't think any of us really know. And that's part of the whole point of his approach, actually, is to create uncertainty about to what extent he really means it. So I actually view that as a deliberate strategy. It's a strategy, you know, I mean, and one other reason maybe that nobody else has tried that strategy before is that actually it has a lot of consequences, you know, when you do that. And so it may be the most effective approach, but it's also not a cost-free approach. So that's what I would say there. I'm sorry this is taking me so long to go through everything. Let me just try very quickly. Vance's role on foreign policy, I'm not really sure, but I think the president, I mean, you know, Trump personally will have the lead role on foreign affairs, not anybody else, you know, including the Secretary of State. You asked the question about this desire of his to be a peacemaker, and sort of how that's linked to his desire to be a deal maker. I think that's sincere, actually, you know, in his own way. And it doesn't mean that it's a way that everybody else would sort of understand or recognize or appreciate. But I think that he, you know, let me say the following. So in 2016, the Center for the National Interest, where I work, we hosted Trump's first foreign policy speech as a presidential candidate. And because of that, we had advanced access to the speech. It was the first time that Trump used a teleprompter, actually. And, you know, I was sitting in the audience listening to him speak, and I had the speech, and I was kind of curious, you know, to see what happened. And there were really only 2 or 3 places where he deviated, actually, from the text. He was very disciplined. But one of them was when he got to nuclear weapons, and he talked about the kind of the horrible dangers of nuclear weapons and nuclear war, and how terrible that is. You know, that's a topic that we've seen him return to, you know, more than once, including during this campaign. And he often expresses this sort of argument that Biden has been leading the United States toward World War III. I think that he kind of does actually have this view, you know, that he can be the person who sort of sits across from Putin, and that leads to peace. And he sits across from Xi, and, you know, that leads to peace. Again, I think the reality of those things is probably a lot more complicated, you know, than he may appreciate. But I do see, when I look at him myself, I do see this apparent strand. Let me just end very briefly on Russia, North Korea. I think that's very consequential. And I mentioned at the beginning, when I was talking about Russia and Ukraine, how the war was driving a lot of other things at the global level. I think that is a very significant consequence of the war. It's sort of one element in this drawing together of you know, China, Russia, Russia, Iran, Russia, North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, as a separate trilateral. I'm not sure I really view China, Russia, North Korea as a trilateral. I think there's too much division between China and Russia, actually, on that one. But these 4 are sort of increasingly clustered together as parts of groups of 2 and 3. not really a group of four. I think that's quite significant. Ukraine, certainly because of the war, is the principal victim of that. I suspect that the next most at-risk country probably is South Korea, actually, precisely because of this Russia-North Korea link. And specifically because Russia is walking away from all of the sanctions because of its position on Western sanctions on Russia. So North Korea will over time go from being really largely isolated internationally to being isolated from 40 or 50 countries. And actually not isolated from everybody else. I think that's what we'll see. And at the same time, North Korea will have the longer the war continues, kind of more money and more technology actually from Russia. I do think they'll have a greater sense of self-confidence. I personally doubt that their alliance at this point would include kind of Russian extended nuclear deterrence, for North Korea. I don't really see that. However, I would be surprised if the Kim regime in North Korea didn't believe that Russia would be of some help in the event of a conflict. And I do think that will lead to more self-confidence, and I think that will be a problem. So that's one I'm watching actually with very great concern. So I'm sorry to have spoken at such great length responding to those 10 questions. I hope it was helpful.
No. It is our long to overwhelm you with 10 questions. So, but thank you very much for your frank and very detailed response to all of the questions, very comprehensively. So thank you very much. And we still have 40 minutes to go. So if you have any question, please raise your hand, and so I can take you and you first, and then, please.
To see, okay. So first of all, thank you very much for organizing this event, and thank you for being here and having the occasion to speak to you. My name is Achim Alan de Mello from Sofia University. And my question is more about the whole system itself. So a bit more of a, let's say, a bird eye on the process.
Mm-hmm.
In your presentation, it seems to me that, and this is not only your case, in many events, it seems to me that we tend to judge each individual US administration on the basis of the president who is coming, right? So it seems to me that we look at the issue in a let's say fragmented form, and now is again the case with Mr. Trump. My question is related to a trend, a general trend, which for me, I think I'm observing it in the United States at least since 14 years so on. We can fix it at the time from the Lehman Brothers crisis as a general decline that whoever comes in the White House, it cannot change the process. So you mentioned about failure in Afghanistan, the negotiation with Iran, and so on. It's not maybe, for example, I'm a reserve officer. I'm an officer of the army. And I lost colleagues in Afghanistan, issues in Iraq, Libya, all that stuff. It's not perhaps that we should see, and also the US should understand, the negotiation process with this country, not as bilateral only, but these countries have allies. These countries do not operate in a vacuum. And I see that perhaps there is a tendency to think a bit narcissistic or a bit over confident about the capacity of the system in the West to manage a crisis. And this is something that perhaps need to
to be changed, because this crisis here in Russia, and I finish, I know it's short of time, has demonstrated that Russia has allies. As you mentioned right now, you might have 40 that are isolated, but the rest is following. The BRICS, you can see whatever is happening. So maybe for the Trump administration should be a good point to change the perspective, how US can negotiate with countries which are not isolated at all. That's my question to you. Thank you.
No, thank you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
One by one, but
Yeah.
I can.
My name is Shikata, a company fellow, Mitsubishi Company Limited. Let me ask you about Taiwan contingency. According to late Prime Minister Abe, a Taiwan contingency is a Japan contingency. But from the view of Trump, I don't think he takes it so seriously, because in the first Trump administration, he canceled almost all Asian leaders summits. So how do you think Trump may deter China from invading Taiwan? Or once it happens, how is he going to respond? I'm afraid that Taiwan, from his point of view, may be just one of those playing cards to make a deal with China. My concern is that Elon Musk is playing a key role. He has a big investment in China, like Shanghai, for example. So I don't think Trump continues to be very tough against China. He must make a deal, and he will continue to make a big business with China. That's what I'm very afraid of. I'd like to ask your opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very briefly, please. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saunders, for your informative lecture. I'm Hiroshi Tajima, member of this institute. I have a question on the US policy of strategic ambiguity. Facing China's threat, I think that people of Taiwan are deeply concerned about this ambiguity. On the US side, it seems there has been no national discussion about the war in Taiwan. In any case, the government would need to consider the attitude of the American people in the wake of Afghan exit. President Biden had stated that the United States would defend Taiwan militarily. So my question is, how the next president will handle this delicate and difficult issue? In other words, will he maintain a policy of strategic ambiguity or take other measures? Thank you.
Thank you. The last question.
Thank you very much, Professor Sahashi, and thank you very much for having this and for wonderful presentation on the wide-ranging issues. My name is Shogo Kawakita with Kyoto News. I have a question about possible policy discrepancies on China between US and Japan. As you know, the Prime Minister Ishiba and President Xi Jinping met for the first time in Peru and agreed to promote a strategic relationship of mutual interest. I understand that was to continue to seek a sort of a win-win relationship. On the other hand, as you said, Team Trump is more hawkish toward Beijing, and they are basically based on the zero-sum thinking. In short, they think if Beijing gains, Washington loses. I personally don't think they are in name only. China hopes in name only. But win-win and the zero-sum approaches are not compatible like oil and water. And while Washington puts more pressure on Japan, Beijing may invite Tokyo to side with it. Japan will be caught between the two powers. That's my concern. So what is your prospect for the future trilateral relationship, and what do you think Japan should do to deal with it? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to be briefer than I was the first time with the questions so we can get through everything here. So look, where the international system is concerned, I think that many policymakers and for that matter, media elites, maybe 10 or 15 years behind in terms of their views of the international system and America's role in it and America's capabilities and influence and leverage. What I would like to see is, a president of the United States and other leaders who really get out into the world and understand what's happening in the rest of the world and explain it to Americans and build a new vision for what America's role in the world can and should be. Because I think that the vision that the United States has had for much of the last 30 years, I think has not been fully successful. And we need to take a different approach, and the world is different also, as I just said. So I think that's quite important. I am actually quite optimistic about the United States and its capabilities. And President-elect Trump, he has his strengths and his weaknesses. We all do. I'm going to sort of leave it to others to argue, whether he has more strengths or more weaknesses, but there certainly are things that he talks about doing and wants to do that could make a real difference for the United States. He wants to further increase kind of energy production of all kinds. He and others want to get rid of a lot of domestic regulations in the United States. Some of that may be mistaken, but some of it might really help to keep the U.S. economy going and potentially even to produce new growth. Certainly the U.S. economy, for an economy of its size and relative to its sort of peers, among other OECD countries, it's doing quite well. So I'm kind of long-term optimistic, but I think there is sort of a dangerous gap between perception and reality that we need to deal with. And I hope that's helpful. Maybe I'll kind of put the two Taiwan-related questions together. I guess, my very first question as I think about China pursuing a Taiwan contingency is, don't they actually have enough problems domestically that they should not really be inviting a lot of additional problems onto themselves? So that's kind of my first question. But if they crossed that threshold and they decided on a military approach to kind of forcing Taiwan into unification with China, the military planners would have to make a decision at the very beginning. Are they going to try to wage a war only against Taiwan, that does nothing to address any, doesn't target any of the American military forces, doesn't target, Japan or Korea or anyone else who might choose to become involved in something like that, in which case they're kind of giving up a lot tactically and taking significant risks on the hope that we will stay out because we don't want to go to war, or does it immediately become a war on everybody else, in the entire region? Okay. Now, if they choose the latter one, then from day one, they're going to be attacking American bases and killing American personnel. And once they have done that, I think, look, I mean, I'm not going to guarantee, I can't guarantee what Trump would do in any given situation. But if they launch an attack like that on the United States, that's going to have a pretty significant impact on Americans and American public opinion. And the desire that exists now, not to be involved in wars might change very quickly. So I think the real question is whether China at the outset would be kind of prepared to take this huge gamble of attacking Taiwan without really doing anything else. In a situation, by the way, I mean, even in that case, how many Japanese live in Taiwan? How many Koreans live in Taiwan? How many Americans live in Taiwan? How many Indonesians live in Taiwan? I mean, it kind of, it becomes a very, very complicated situation, I think, pretty quickly. So, I certainly understand the incentives. I sort of see and feel the threat. I think it's a real danger. I'm particularly worried in this period that we're in right now. I alluded already to kind of, how many anti-missile interceptors do we have and can we produce and how quickly? And, this is sort of precisely the position that some of the people around Trump are taking, of course, that we're drawing down our own stocks too much. And I think that's a legitimate concern and a legitimate reason to worry. That's kind of a window of opportunity argument, I guess I would say. If you don't strike now, then the United States has kind of warning and is going to be spending the next 10 years or 15 years or whatever preparing itself and getting ready for all of this. So I certainly do see risks and I do see dangers, but I think the decision actually to do something like that, at least from my point of view, would require first some kind of development that the Chinese leadership believes would compel them to act. I think it's important for the United States and everyone else, to try to avoid being in that situation in the first place. So.
Okay, thank you very much. And I believe you may have more question, but we are just simply run out of time. So thank you very much for Mr. Saunders for your very comprehensive discussion of many aspects of Trump 2.0 foreign policy. And we learned a lot. Thank you very much for taking your time to provide your perspective here in JIIA. And I also want to thank you for Professor Kubo and President Kubo for your presence here. And thank you very much for your participation today. This is the end of today's seminar. Thank you very much. And please join me for, thanking for him.
Thank you. Thank you. No, thank you.